Ever notice how the most powerful people in history spent significant time alone? They weren't at parties, they weren't surrounded by crowds, they were in solitude, thinking, planning, becoming. Meanwhile, everyone else desperately avoids being alone for even 5 minutes. So what do they understand that you don't? I am about to tell you something that goes against everything society has programmed into you. Your fear of being alone is keeping you weak. Your need for constant company is draining your power, and the loneliness you've been running from might be the greatest gift you've ever been offered. Think about your average day. How much time do you spend performing for others, adjusting yourself to fit in, saying things you don't mean to maintain relationships, absorbing other people's problems, opinions, and energy? By the time you are done managing everyone else, what is left of you? Here's what Machiavelli understood that modern society desperately tries to hide. The crowd is not your friend. Other people's opinions are chains, and the person who masters solitude masters themselves. Every great leader, thinker, and creator throughout history knew this. They built their power in isolation before they deployed it in public. What if I told you that your loneliness isn't a problem to be solved, but a power to be harnessed? That the discomfort you feel alone is actually withdrawal from a social addiction? That the people most afraid of solitude are the people least capable of independent thought? This isn't antisocial bitterness. This is the psychology of self-sovereignty. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why society wants you afraid of being alone, why your most powerful self can only emerge in solitude, and most importantly, how to transform your alone time from something you fear into your greatest competitive advantage. Are you ready to stop needing the crowd and start building your empire in silence? Drop this affirmation in the comments. I am powerful alone. Number 1. The loneliness lie. Let's start by dismantling the biggest lie you've been told about being alone. Society has convinced you that solitude equals loneliness and loneliness equals suffering. But these are three completely different things, and confusing them is keeping you trapped. Solitude is the state of being alone. That is it. No judgment, no emotion, just a circumstance. Loneliness is an emotional response, a feeling of disconnection that can happen whether you are alone or surrounded by thousands. Suffering is what happens when you resist either state instead of mastering it. Here is what nobody tells you. You can be surrounded by people and feel completely alone. You can be entirely by yourself and feel deeply connected. The external circumstance of having company has almost nothing to do with the internal experience of fulfillment. Yet we've been programmed to chase the circumstance instead of cultivating the experience. Machiavelli wrote, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see and few can feel." Society judges by the eye. It sees someone alone and assumes suffering. It sees someone in a crowd and assumes happiness. Both assumptions are usually wrong. The person alone might be building an empire. The person in the crowd might be dying inside. The loneliness lie serves a purpose. It keeps you consuming. It keeps you conforming. It keeps you dependent on external validation. A person who can be happy alone is a person who can't be controlled through social pressure. That is dangerous to systems that need your compliance. Notice how every advertisement, every social platform, every cultural message reinforces the fear of being alone. Buy this so people like you. Join this so you belong. Do this so you are not left out. The entire economy of attention depends on your terror of solitude. If you were content alone, you'd consume less, conform less, comply less. Think about who benefits from your fear of being alone. Social media companies that profit from your attention. Advertisers who sell you cures for the loneliness they manufacture. People who manipulate you because they know you are terrified of losing them. Your fear of solitude is everyone else's leverage over you. The truth is that solitude is neutral. What you do with it determines whether it is suffering or power. The person who fears it will suffer. The person who masters it will transcend. Drop this affirmation in the comments. Solitude is my sanctuary. Number 2. The clarity of isolation. Here is what happens to your mind when you are constantly surrounded by others. You lose the ability to think your own thoughts. You become an averaging machine, processing everyone else's opinions and emotions instead of generating your own. Isolation is how you reclaim your cognitive sovereignty. When you are with others, your brain is constantly processing social information, reading facial expressions, monitoring your own performance, adjusting to group dynamics, filtering your thoughts through what will they think. This social processing consumes enormous cognitive resources that could otherwise fuel deep thinking. In solitude, all that processing power becomes available for you, for your thoughts, for your problems, for your creations. This is why virtually every major creative and intellectual breakthrough in history came from periods of isolation. Newton during the plague, Einstein at the patent office, every writer in their quiet room. Machiavelli himself wrote The Prince during exile, cut off from the political world he'd inhabited. His isolation became the crucible for ideas that would influence power dynamics for 500 years. Would he have produced such clarity surrounded by the noise of Florentine politics? Almost certainly not. Think about your own best ideas, your deepest insights, your most creative solutions. When did they come? Almost certainly not in meetings, not at parties, not while scrolling social media. They came in the shower, on walks alone. In the middle of the night, in the moments when you were finally free from the mental noise of others. Your mind needs solitude the way your body needs sleep. It is not optional for high performance. It is essential. The person who never has time alone never has time to think deeply, and the person who never thinks deeply will always be outmaneuvered by those who do. Every hour you spend in shallow social interaction is an hour you are not spending in deep, independent thought. The crowd provides comfort, but steals clarity. Solitude requires courage, but delivers wisdom. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My best thinking happens alone. Number 3. The energy equation. Let's talk about something nobody measures but everyone experiences. The massive energy cost of constant human interaction. Because relationships aren't free, they're paid for in attention, emotional labor, and life force that could go elsewhere. Every relationship in your life is a transaction. Not in a cold way, in a real way. You spend energy maintaining connections. You spend energy managing expectations. You spend energy processing others' emotions. You spend energy performing whatever version of yourself each relationship requires. Now add up all those transactions. The friends who need you to listen. The family who needs you to show up. The colleagues who need you to collaborate. The acquaintances who need you to be pleasant. By the end of most days, you've given so much energy to others that there is nothing left for yourself. Machiavelli observed, "He who neglects what is done for what ought to be done sooner affects his ruin than his preservation." Applied here, when you neglect your own energy needs to serve what you feel you ought to give to others, you guarantee your own depletion, your own ruin. Solitude is how you recharge. It is not selfishness. It is sustainability. The person who never has time alone never has time to restore their energy. They run on empty, giving diminishing returns to everyone, including themselves. Eventually, they collapse or become bitter at the very relationships they sacrificed everything for. Think about the most energized, powerful people you know. They almost certainly protect their solitude fiercely. They disappear sometimes. They're selective about social obligations. They don't feel guilty about saying no. This isn't coldness. It is wisdom about energy management. The energy you save in solitude becomes the energy you deploy in action. The restoration you get alone becomes the power you bring to meaningful connections. Isolation isn't the opposite of engagement. It is the foundation that makes real engagement possible. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My solitude restores my power. Number 4. Building yourself in silence. Here's the truth about personal development that nobody wants to hear. You cannot build yourself while constantly surrounded by others. Every moment of growth, every skill acquisition, every deep improvement happens in isolation. The crowd consumes you, solitude constructs you. Think about every skill you've truly mastered. The hours of practice weren't social events. Learning an instrument, developing expertise, building your body, writing, coding, creating. All of these require extended periods of focused solitary effort that social time actively prevents. Machiavelli wrote, "A prince ought to have no other aim or thought, nor select anything else for his study, than war and its rules and discipline. For you replace war with your craft, your calling, your path to power. Mastery requires monastic dedication that social obligations constantly undermine. The people who achieve extraordinary things spend extraordinary amounts of time alone. Not because they're antisocial, but because they understand that building yourself requires removing yourself from the constant distraction and dilution of social interaction. When you are with others, you maintain. When you are alone, you grow. Social time is for deploying who you are. Solitary time is for developing who you are becoming. The person who is always social is always the same. The person who prioritizes solitude is always evolving. Your evolution happens in silence. Your transformation occurs in solitude. The next level version of yourself is being built, not at parties, not in group chats, not in meetings, but in the quiet hours when you are investing in yourself without audience or distraction. Ask yourself honestly, how much time this week did you spend building yourself versus maintaining social connections? If the ratio is heavily towards social, you are consuming yourself rather than constructing yourself. Solitude is where you are built. Society is where you are deployed. Consider the compounding effect. An hour alone building skills compounds into expertise. An hour socializing maintains but doesn't advance. Over years, the person who prioritizes solitary development builds capabilities that social butterflies simply cannot match. This isn't theory. Look at every world-class performer in any field. Their hours of solitary practice dwarf their social time. Machiavelli wrote, "There is no avoiding war. It can only be postponed to the advantage of others." The same applies to the war for your potential. Every day you postpone solitary development to prioritize socializing. You advantage others who are building while you maintain. The competition for excellence is won in quiet rooms, not crowded ones. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I build myself in silence. Number 5. Knowing yourself through solitude. Here is something uncomfortable. Most people have no idea who they actually are. They've never spent enough time alone to find out. Their identity is just an accumulation of other people's expectations, reflected back at them through endless social interaction. When you are constantly with others, you are constantly performing. You become whoever each situation requires. The professional self at work, the fun self with friends, the dutiful self with family, the attractive self on dates. But who are you when no one's watching? When there is no performance required? Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." But do you experience what you really are, or are you so busy managing appearances that you've lost touch with the reality underneath? Solitude is the only place where you can meet yourself without the distortion of performance. In solitude, there is no one to impress, no role to play, no expectation to meet, just you facing yourself. This is terrifying for most people because they don't like what they find. Or more often, they find nothing. An empty space where a self should be, a collection of borrowed opinions and second-hand personalities. But this confrontation is necessary. You cannot strengthen a self you've never met. You cannot develop authentic confidence while performing for approval. You cannot know what you really want while constantly absorbing what others want for you. Solitude is the laboratory of self-discovery. The questions you need to answer can only be answered alone. What do you actually believe? What do you actually want? What would you do if no one ever knew? Who would you be if no one was watching? These questions require solitude to even ask, let alone answer. Until you can sit comfortably alone with yourself for extended periods, you don't actually know yourself. You know your social performance. You know your adapted self. But the core, the real you, remains a stranger. Solitude is the introduction you've been avoiding. The Stoics practiced solitary reflection as the primary path to self-knowledge. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations alone, examining his thoughts, testing his principles, discovering his flaws. Without that solitary examination, he would have remained a mystery to himself, like most people remain today. Start small if extended solitude feels impossible. An hour without phone, without media, without distraction, just you and your thoughts. Notice what emerges. Notice what you discover. Notice how uncomfortable it feels at first, and how clarifying it becomes with practice. This discomfort is the feeling of finally meeting yourself. Drop this affirmation in the comments. In solitude, I find myself. Number 6. The independence dividend. Here is the practical power that comes from mastering solitude. When you don't need others, you can't be controlled through that need. Your independence becomes your invulnerability. And in a world full of people who can be manipulated through their social dependency, this makes you exceptionally powerful. Think about how people are typically controlled. Threats to their relationships, fear of social exclusion, worry about what others will think, desperation to be included, liked, accepted. All of these only work on people who need others for their well-being. Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But even better is to be neither feared nor loved, but simply complete in yourself." The person who doesn't need your love can't be manipulated through its withdrawal. The person who doesn't fear your disapproval can't be controlled through social pressure. This independence changes every negotiation, every relationship, every interaction. When you genuinely don't need the other person's approval, acceptance, or company, you negotiate from strength. They sense it. They can't threaten you with abandonment because you are perfectly fine alone. Watch how this plays out practically. The employee who doesn't desperately need the job can negotiate better terms. The person who doesn't desperately need the relationship can maintain healthy boundaries. The entrepreneur who doesn't need investor approval can hold out for better deals. Independence is leverage. Your ability to be alone happily becomes your immunity to manipulation. Every person who masters solitude becomes impossible to control through the social tools that work on everyone else. You become psychologically sovereign in a world of psychological dependence. This sovereignty extends to every area of life. In friendships, you can maintain healthy boundaries because you don't desperately need approval. In work, you can take principled stands because you don't desperately need belonging. In romance, you can require respect because you don't desperately need companionship. Every domain improves when need is replaced by choice. Think about the most powerful people you've encountered. They all share this quality of self-sufficiency. They seem complete in themselves. They don't chase approval. They don't fear exclusion. That completeness comes from having mastered solitude, from knowing they can thrive regardless of social circumstances. This isn't about rejecting all connection. It is about ensuring your connections are choices rather than dependencies. You can love people without needing them. You can enjoy company without requiring it. You can participate in relationships without being controlled by fear of losing them. That is the independence dividend. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I need no one, but I choose many. Number 7. Quality over quantity. In connection. Here is the final piece that transforms your understanding of solitude in society. Mastering alone time doesn't mean rejecting human connection. It means radically elevating the quality of connection you'll accept. Most people's social lives are wide but shallow. Yours becomes narrow but deep. When you are afraid of being alone, you accept any company. You maintain relationships that drain you, because empty connection seems better than no connection. You keep people around who don't actually enrich your life, because their presence fills the silence you fear. Machiavelli wrote, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." When you master solitude, you become extremely selective about who earns your time. You'd rather be alone than poorly accompanied. Your standards rise because settling becomes unnecessary. This selectivity creates space for real relationships. The energy you save by not maintaining dozens of shallow connections becomes available for a few deep ones. The people who meet your elevated standards become genuine additions to your life rather than noise that fills the void. Think about what you actually want from human connection. Not quantity, not impressive social media numbers, not packed calendars. You want to be genuinely known, to genuinely know others, to have people in your life who actually matter, who you actually matter to. That requires depth that shallow social abundance prevents. The person who masters solitude has the rarest social gift: presence. When they're with you, they're fully with you. They're not there to fill a void or feed a need. They're there because they genuinely choose to be. That quality of presence is impossible for someone who is afraid to be alone. Your relationships transform when you can be happy alone. You stop tolerating mediocre connections. You stop accepting people who drain you. You stop performing for approval you don't need. What remains is authentic, chosen, meaningful connection that enriches rather than depletes. Drop this affirmation in the comments: I choose depth over breadth. So what happens when you master solitude? When you see through the loneliness lie, when you access the clarity of isolation, when you understand the energy equation, when you build yourself in silence, when you know yourself through solitude, when you claim the independence dividend, when you choose quality over quantity. First, you become impossible to manipulate through social pressure. The threats that control others, exclusion, disapproval, abandonment, lose their power over you. You move through social situations with the freedom of someone who genuinely doesn't need them. Second, your thinking deepens. Without constant social noise, you finally have space for original thought. Your ideas become your own. Your perspectives become unique. You develop the intellectual depth that only comes from extended solitary reflection. Third, you build yourself faster. All the energy that went into maintaining shallow connections now goes into developing yourself. Your skills accelerate. Your growth compounds. You become formidable, while others stay stagnant through constant social distraction. Fourth, your relationships transform. The connections you choose become deeper and more meaningful. You give more presence because you have more to give. You receive more because you only accept quality. Your social life shrinks in size but expands in value. Machiavelli wrote, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." The wise person masters solitude before life forces it upon them. The fool only learns to be alone after everyone has left. Don't wait for circumstances to teach you. Learn now. Master it now. If you've made it this far, you are not like most people. Most people are so afraid of being alone that they can't even consider these ideas clearly. Most people would rather be in bad company than no company. Most people will never know the power that comes from mastering solitude, but you are still here, which means something in you recognizes the truth. Something in you is tired of the shallow connections, the constant performance, the fear of being alone. Something in you is ready to embrace solitude as the gift it actually is. Remember what we've covered: the loneliness lie that confuses solitude with suffering, the clarity of isolation that enables deep thought, the energy equation that requires restoration, building yourself in silence without distraction. knowing yourself through solitary self-confrontation, the independence dividend that makes you unmalleable and quality over quantity in connection. These aren't antisocial ideas. They're the foundation of genuine social power. The person who has mastered solitude brings more to every connection than someone who needs connection to feel whole. Your independence makes your presence valuable. Your wholeness makes your love real. If this video freed you from the fear of being alone, smash that like button. If you know someone trapped in shallow connections who needs to hear this truth, share it with them. And if you want more content that transforms your isolation into power, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. The transformation from fearing solitude to mastering it starts with a single decision. You've just watched the blueprint. Now it is time to embrace your alone time as the advantage it truly is. Drop this final affirmation in the comments. Being alone is my superpower. Remember, in a world full of people desperately running from themselves, the person who can sit peacefully alone holds all the power. Be that person. Master your solitude, and watch how everything in your life transforms when you finally stop fearing the silence.